So Moses tells the Pharaoh to let his people go, but that's not the phrase. The phrase is God tells Moses to say this. He's, let my people go so they may worship me in the desert. And so you move out of the tyranny. That's what happens, let's say, in the throes of a psychedelic experience, is that the preconceptions are shattered. Now you're somewhere unstructured. Okay, well, you can't worship what's unstructured. You have to find the proper structuring for your new freedom. The vision that's put forward in the book of Exodus is a vision of multidimensional, responsible identity. So you take on responsibility for your own life. You take on responsibility for the life of your wife or your husband. You take on responsibility for your family. You're a model for your community. You serve your state. You do what you can for your nation, and that's all united under your highest upward orientation. And that's ordered freedom. That's ordered freedom. It's not the same as the hedonistic freedom that the people like Nixon and the sort of right-wing conservatives of the 1960s were terrified by, that kind of hedonistic anarchy. It's not freedom.
It had erupted out of nowhere. I mean, we're right now in 2024. I want you to imagine 2014. It's the same. It's the same. There's nothing different other than the threat of AI and war, and socially, the world's the same. You go from 1956 to 1966, you have a completely different world. A completely different world. Everyone's going crazy. The opposition to the Vietnam War has got people in the streets. Ken Kesey, Tim Leary, tune in, drop out, all that. This world is changing in this radical way. There had been nothing like it. And in a lot of what you're saying about these experiences happening and people just disconnecting and not having discipline and structure and just experiencing these things and just disconnecting completely from society was the problem. That was the problem.
It's a major problem. Well, it's still a problem now to some degree because people who are pursuing, let's say, nonconformist freedom don't understand that the replacement for freedom isn't hedonistic anarchy. And that's partly because it's self-defeating. It's also pointless. It's also pointless and meaningless. And it's partly pointless and meaningless because imagine, and this is part of the implication of the story of Abraham, is that the instinct of meaning comes to you when you pursue a pathway that specifies, what would you say, the limitless development of your integrated psyche. But it's not just the psyche, it's the integration of the psyche with all the different levels of society. Like, for example, insofar as you're well put together, you're going to be a highly functional husband to your wife, right? Like, your own psychological organization, integration, cannot be divorced from the union that you make with your wife. They're the same thing. And then you can extend that to your kids. For you to get your act together means simultaneously that you establish the proper relationship with your wife and with your children. Those are the same thing. And then if you can manage that, you do the same thing with the broader community. It all stacks up musically. And so then mental health doesn't become how your psyche is organized internally, which is what the clinical psychologists misled people into believing. It's more like the harmony that obtains from the psyche upward through society when everything is stacked up properly to the up to the highest level possible of being. And that's another definition of God. So one of the things I tried to do in this book is to actually define what it is that we're arguing about. Because the old man in the sky superstition doesn't cover the territory. So for example, if you look at God in the story of Abraham and you say, do you believe in that God? What you're asking, even though you might not know it, is, do you believe that there is a call to adventure and that following that call will not only integrate you, but serve society in the highest possible manner? And that's a pretty straightforward question. It has very little to do with anything that's even vaguely superstitious. Like, is that call there? You certainly reward it in your children if you have the least bit of sense. And so I've been trying to define what it is that we're arguing about. And so there's another definition too, that you see this in the story of Adam and Eve. So in the story of Adam and Eve, one of the ways God is characterized is as the spirit that calls you on your pride and presumption.